the 27th, so not looking forward to it after you getting yours.
No, I think most people have been okay, but I mean, half our village was there when I went down for it, and I felt absolutely great. And then at night, I was just absolutely wiped. And I went to bed at 8 o'clock.
I was
in the night, I just thought
exactly the same. Was it the Oxford one you had, Stephen?
No, it was the Pfizer.
Oh, was it? No, I had the Oxford one. It was like I was run over by a steamroller.
I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought I had really bad flu. And I was
just think we would all be talking about 20 years ago, gentlemen.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a good night last night. Yeah. Morning, Mr. Lecturer.
Morning, Mr. Carter. Morning, all.
Good morning. Morning, Peter. Right, I'm just letting people in here. Can you righty lot put yourselves on mute? Thank you very much. Right. Okay.
It's 10 o'clock.
Okay. So if it's 10 o'clock, let's crack on. Sorry, lots of people still coming in. Just give me 1 second. Right.
That was Mr. Broster in and out.
I'm going to mute you, Mr. Carter, if that's all right. Okay.
I'll go on mute.
There you go, Nick, I've muted you. All right. Okay, let's get the proceedings underway. So, well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you, also bright and cheery, despite everything going on around us. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome two new guests to our Tuesday morning sessions. Douglas Ross, MP, who I will introduce formally in a moment, and Ian Millar from the École Hôtellerie de Lausanne in Switzerland. Douglas is going to talk to us first. So Ian, if you can keep your powder dry, we'll look forward to hearing from you shortly. So if I may, Douglas, I believe you're there. I see your name on the list. Excellent, good, well, welcome, and thank you very much indeed for sparing the time to join our crew. So if I may, I will just introduce you, Douglas. Douglas is going to talk to us for 10 or 15 minutes, giving us some of his views and an update of how he sees things progressing. As per usual, if people have got questions they would like me to post to Douglas, please just pop them in the chat box and I will do my best to get through any questions that are there. I've also got a few pre-prepared questions just in case you're all asleep and don't get round to putting any questions in the box, but I think that's extremely unlikely. So Douglas, thank you again. Just briefly by way of introduction, Douglas is MP, an MP and leader of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. He has served as MP for his home constituency of Moray since 2017. Prior to this, he represented the Highlands and Islands region as an MSP from 2015. Let me just mute my friend Mark. 2016, and as a local Moray councillor for 10 years. He's married to Crystal, a police sergeant in Elgin, and they have a one-year-old son, Alistair, who I know occasionally joins in his Zoom calls because I've met Alistair before on a previous call. And they happily have a baby on the way also. So congratulations, Douglas.
Yeah.
In his free time, Douglas is a qualified football referee, officiating games for the Scottish FA, UEFA, and FIFA. Prior to entering politics, Douglas was a dairyman and worked on the same farm as his father near Forres. Douglas attended Alvas Primary and Forres Academy before studying at the Scottish Agricultural College at Auchencruve in Ayr. Douglas, thank you very much for sparing the time. I know you're an extremely busy man, and it is very, very much appreciated. So can I hand the floor to you, Douglas, just to perhaps share some thoughts with us? And as I say, if anybody's got questions for Douglas, please pop them in the chat box, and I'll pose them to Douglas once he's finished his whatever he has to say to us this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Roddy, for that introduction. And can I thank you for inviting me along to this call and for actually hosting these calls since March last year. I think they're a great idea that you came up with to get everyone across the UK, but I know you've got a lot of Scottish representatives as well, but everyone on this call to discuss the ongoing challenges. And none of us really expected back in March of last year, when this pandemic began, that we would still be in such a severe lockdown as we currently are. So I think I want to keep my opening remarks as brief as possible, because I'd like to get to questions and hear your feedback on where the industry is at the moment and going forward. But I suppose the hospitality and the tourism industry has been one of the worst affected by the pandemic. And when we started out with the severe restrictions back in March, people were speaking about it was going to be like 3 winters, because you were losing that summer period that we're moving into. You then had the winter and then the spring, but it just seems to be getting worse and worse. You know, we're looking at 4 or 5 winters, it seems like you're having to go through, with not the level of support I believe the industry should have received, particularly in Scotland. I think there has been a lot of good support in terms of the furlough scheme. It has helped to protect many jobs in hospitality. The cut in VAT, it was a very positive move by the Chancellor, the extension of that when it was due to finish in January to March, and we'll see what happens in the budget going forward. So I think there has been a lot of positive moves to support the industry, but I am concerned that in Scotland, less than half of the money that has been earmarked for support schemes for businesses has actually been paid out. And we seem to have a situation in Scotland where schemes are announced to great fanfare with no detail, the funding still to be allocated, and it is weeks and sometimes months later before that can actually be accessed by the businesses who need it right now. So I've been saying since I became leader in August last year that we need to have a very tight turnaround. We need to ensure that there is a proposal I put forward of 10 working days, that, you know, when an application goes in, it will be scrutinised within those 10 days, turned around and either accepted or rejected, and the money then into your account, rather than having to wait weeks for different local authorities to operate at different paces. I also want a review of the current schemes that are in place, because there is no doubt that some businesses are falling through the cracks. So we should have an overview of the schemes that are in place, those which are not paying out the money that was allocated to them. So there's a need elsewhere, and we should redirect those funds to where they are required. And we also need to listen to business far more. I think throughout this pandemic, I felt that business has been an afterthought for the Scottish Government. And that's why I proposed a Coronavirus Business Advisory Council for businesses to be in the meetings with the Scottish Government to discuss restrictions that may be about to be implemented, or as restrictions were released, because we found that particularly those in the hospitality sector were sometimes given 48 hours notice that they would have to close or significantly alter their way of trading. And that's simply not enough time to get staff in place, either stop coming into work or to get back into work, to change orders for food or beverages. And that's why we said there should be a 7-day minimum adaptation period to give you that week to plan your business for the changes in the restrictions that were either coming or being eased. And the fact that Nicola Sturgeon said in the Parliament she would consider that idea, but twice we put it to a vote and the SNP have voted against it, I think just adds to the narrative that they are not willing to listen to businesses. I think as we get through this health pandemic, we've got to look at the economic emergency that we will face in this country for months and years. And that's why business has to be at the heart of everything we do. And that's why when the Scottish Government rejected the idea of a coronavirus business advisory council, I set one up myself, and I met with the group last night. That was our second meeting, and looking at how we can produce a route map out of this, because the vaccine gives us all hope. I know when I first came onto the call, I was hearing some of you discussing the vaccines you've received. I'm a bit further down the list to receive it myself, but I know my mum and dad have both received it within the last week, and it gives them and everyone, the 1.6 million people in Scotland, that protection. Hopefully allow us to release the restrictions that we've all been living with for far too long. But we don't have a route map yet of when we can start to allow our freedoms to be eased and get back to a form of normality, and allow people to start using businesses, in particular our hospitality sector. So I think that's where the focus has to be, and I'd be keen to hear your views on that. And finally, I just think hospitality and tourism is so important for Scotland. You know, you provide an outstanding service that attracts local, national and international visitors to our areas year in, year out. And if you're not there as we get through this pandemic, then our economy is going to suffer. So that's why I think the measures put in place to support you now can't just stop in a cliff edge. We can't have, well, flick the switch, the health pandemic's over, so businesses will be back to normal. It will take some time, and I want to ensure that support is there for you, you know, beyond the health emergency, because we need to ensure that as many businesses that have been protected through the last 10, 11 months are still there in 10, 11 years' time.
Thank you very much, Douglas. You mentioned that half the funds that have been made available have not actually been paid out. Is that because they haven't been applied for, or is that just simply because the red tape and bureaucracy is getting in the way of it all?
It's the latter. It's because they are announced, and I've had a number of calls with, for example, B&B operator self-caterers who heard about schemes back in December, that at the beginning of this month, they still didn't know what the criteria were to apply for these schemes, what the level of financial support would be, how they can apply. We're doing it through local authorities, so you tend to have 32 different schemes and paperwork for people to fill in to get these grants. So the biggest blockage, I believe, in getting that money out is it gets announced to great fanfare with no detail behind it. So I'd rather, when a scheme is announced, they are ready to go within days, rather than businesses thinking, well, we might be able to benefit from that, but not knowing the detail of that scheme for several weeks later. So that's the reason, is they are announced with no detail, which then has to be worked on at Scottish Government level and then fed into local authority level, and that takes time. But it's time that I don't believe businesses should have to wait to get that support.
Okay, thanks very much. A more general question, Douglas. You know, as you opened by saying, I don't think any of us thought we'd be sitting here, you know, pretty much 12 months later on after the first lockdown, still in such straitened times. But against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic, what do you feel the respective Westminster and Holyrood governments have done well, and what do you think that perhaps they could have done better?
Well, there's no doubt they both made mistakes, serious mistakes, and I'm sure there will be inquiries into this in the years ahead. I think when I look at Scotland, the decision to discharge people who had been tested positive for COVID in hospital into the care home setting was a major mistake. And I think there was issues with how we dealt with residents in care homes south of the border as well. And I think it's right that both governments accept they've made errors in the same way as governments around the world have made errors. I think if we look at the positives, if we can, from such an awful pandemic, the vaccine rollout has been world leading, certainly outstanding in comparison to our European neighbours, in terms of not just getting the jabs in people's arms, but months and months ago, sorry, my computer was threatening to shut me down there. Months and months ago, the UK government took the decision to procure vast amounts of vaccines before we knew if they were going to get authorisation or not. And that has allowed us to lead the way in terms of getting over 15 million people vaccinated by the middle of this month. When that target was set, people said that was the Prime Minister being overly ambitious again and it would never be met. Well, we did meet it. We crashed through it days ahead of target. And I think that is a positive for the UK, but also we've seen in Scotland, as I say, over 1.6 million people vaccinated. So it's a success story north and south of the border.
Just on the question of vaccines, you know, it was fairly well covered in the press that the Scottish government was somewhat, or Scotland, sorry, not the Scottish government, but Scotland was somewhat lagging behind the rest of the UK in terms of the vaccination programme. Do we know, have Scotland caught up?
So on a daily rate, they are now vaccinating per head of population, roughly the same as the rest of the United Kingdom. On some days, they are the top performing of the four nations. But overall, they are still at the bottom. The percentage per head of population vaccinated in Scotland is lower than other parts of the United Kingdom. And that comes back to the sluggish start. Now, Nicola Sturgeon made the point that's because she was focusing on care homes, so it would be slower. That argument didn't really have much merit, because in Wales they also focused on care homes very early on, and they were well ahead of Scotland in the first couple of weeks. So, you know, I think there was understandable criticism. I was called out for not getting behind the Scottish government and supporting them enough, but I think it was right to highlight failures, and that has meant the issues that we saw early on in the vaccination rollout, where GPs were saying we could be jagging far more people, but we don't have the supplies, have largely been resolved, and we've been able to meet the targets here in Scotland as well.
Good. Well, that's encouraging to hear. I mean, clearly the hospitality and tourism sector has been particularly hard hit by the pandemic, as we all know. And despite much government support, many business owners and operators are facing business collapse, even with a relatively early resumption in trading. What hope can you hold out for these businesses, these guys who are right on the edge? Is there any likelihood of further support forthcoming, do you think, Douglas?
Well, I think there has to be, and obviously I'm not going to preempt what the Chancellor will say in his budget, but every time he's come to the House of Commons to make statements on business support, I believe he's done as well as he could in terms of providing additional financial support for businesses. And we are not through this pandemic yet. So certainly the message I put to the Chancellor when I met with him last week, and I continued discussions with him, is we can't just have this cliff edge that, you know, when we get X number of people vaccinated and we start to ease restrictions, suddenly all our business support stops, because business will not get back to normality immediately. It will take some time for businesses to get back to a form of normality, and indeed for the public, I think, to have confidence to go back out again. And we saw that at the end of the first lockdown, that people were worried. Now, the vaccine helps, but we've got to ensure that the businesses continue to be supported through what will be difficult months ahead. It's not going to suddenly one day just be all of a sudden back to normal. And that's why I've said, for example, in the furlough scheme, it's protected 930,000 jobs here in Scotland. If that just comes to immediate end, those jobs would have been paid for by the taxpayer through the pandemic, and many will ultimately still be lost if we take away that support straight away. So it's looking at a tapering effect and looking at how businesses can continue to be supported even when some of the restrictions are lifted, because it will not be a return to normal as quickly as we'd all like.
Thank you. I mean, on that, what is your best estimate or guess? I mean, we've all got a crystal ball. Yours is probably a little better than most of ours. What's your best estimate or guess as to when businesses, both north and south of the border, are likely to be able to recommence trading? I mean, Boris Johnson's obviously playing his cards fairly close to his chest, and understandably so. I mean, I think we're all realistic enough to understand why. But what's your best guess as to when things are likely to be eased a bit?
Well, I think now people understand there's not going to be a date put in the diary to say by X day in X month we will be out of these restrictions, because as we saw at the end of last year, this virus can mutate. When it gets into the community again, it can change and become more severe, it can become more transmissible, and that's the biggest issue that governments have in terms of predicting where we will be in a few months' time. But I don't think that should stop us from having a route map that looks at clear triggers. So you all as businesses can see, if the test positivity level is below 5% for 7 days, what does that mean? If the number of people in ICU has dropped to low levels, what does that mean? If the number of people vaccinated in the population goes from 25% to 50%, what does that mean? So I'd like to see, and this is what I'm going to be calling for this week, is clear targets that when they are met, businesses can know that will see an ease to the restrictions that have been in place now across mainland Scotland, again, since 26th of December, but in many parts of the country, it's since early autumn last year. So my crystal ball doesn't allow me, and I think it would be irresponsible to give an actual date, but I do want to see some triggers that you can all look at and see, well, we're on the right path here, so we are moving towards reopening. And I think that would help businesses have some confidence to plan for reopening.
Thank you, Douglas. I'm just going to pick up a couple of questions out of the chat box here. From Stuart Broster. Roddy, can you please ask Douglas, now football has been given the yellow card with his part-time experience, what's the next step? And what does he think of the different policies re international inbound travel? And how does happen? And I think what he's saying is, and how are sort of relations between the two governments progressing? Because clearly there's been some divergence of opinion as to how international visitors should be treated.
Yeah, so if I take the international visitors first, and this is something I've commented on quite a bit in the last few days, I think we do need to realise we are speaking about an incredibly small number of people who travel into other parts of the United Kingdom to then have an onward travel that's not by an aeroplane into Scotland. So the vast majority of people who will be quarantined will be at hotel airports because they will have travelled directly into Scotland. If they travel into England at the moment and go north of the border, they still have to quarantine. And I think this sometimes gets missed. They have to quarantine at home for 10 days and undergo 2 tests in the same way those within hotels have to be tested twice for COVID-19 as well. But there have been ongoing discussions with the UK and Scottish governments. I believe that's continuing. You know, I got an update this morning. That will continue. But I think this whole issue around the border and do we close the border for people coming from England into Scotland has been conflated slightly into a bigger issue than it actually is, because we are dealing with extremely small numbers of people. And I just want the two governments to work together. They can have different schemes. That's, you know, perfectly legitimate. Their health advisors might be advising slightly different things, but overall, I think people just want them to work together to try and contain the virus as much as possible. On the first part of Stuart's question about football, obviously, for those who don't know, there was the story yesterday that a number of Rangers players had been at a house party. This follows the controversy of Celtic going to Dubai for a winter training camp and not potentially social distancing while they were out there. It follows Aberdeen Football Club at the very beginning, having players seen out drinking together in groups that were bigger than they should have been in. And I made it clear yesterday, you know, and I'm in a privileged position, you know, before I've been injured for the last few weeks, but before that, I was able to travel across Scotland to officiate games in a very controlled way. I had to be tested, you had to be temperature checked when you go into a ground. So, you know, the vast majority of us were following very strict guidance, which allowed us to continue to operate within the game. And the small minority who put that all at risk are undermining the efforts of everyone involved in football who are following the guidelines, and indeed the people across Scotland and the UK who want football to continue. It's not the same without having spectators in the ground, but I do know a number of people that it's really important for them that on a Saturday they can watch their local team on a live stream or watch a game on TV. So I think these highly paid players have to respect the rules that have been put in place to allow them to have exemptions, and that in turn allows the vast majority of people who want to continue to follow football to do that during these difficult months.
Thanks, Douglas. From Roddy Whiteford, in light of the recent additional funding of 1.1 billion granted by central government, how do you see that money getting into supporting the Scottish economy? How much of it's headed north of the border?
Yeah, so that full 1.1 billion comes to Scotland. That's Scotland's allocation. Steve Barclay, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, has said that money is available to spend right now. He's also said it can be rolled over into further financial years. I understand there's been an addition to the business in Holyrood today that the Scottish Government want to have a budget.
Oh, we've lost Douglas. Where's he gone? Maybe his computer switched off. We'll just give him a moment to hopefully reappear, because I've got questions queuing up here. Whilst we're waiting, Ian Millar, you're with us, I believe.
Yes, I'm here, buddy.
Excellent, good. Well, welcome. Douglas will be back, no doubt, in a minute. But in the meantime, I might just take the opportunity of introducing you so as not to waste valuable time. Oh, here he comes. Hit the pause button. Sorry, Ian. Be back to you shortly. Nah, where's Douglas?
Sorry, is that me back again, Roddy?
It's you back again. We were missing you, but we're glad you made it back.
No, I'm sorry. So my computer did decide to do a restart right at the most inappropriate time. My iPad's out of charge, so I'm now doing this on my phone. So apologies, that shouldn't have happened. But I was saying the Scottish Government have added an item of business to the Scottish Parliament today for a budget update. So it may be about how they plan to spend that additional £1.1 billion. We have said, as Scottish Conservatives, we want to see that going into business support. They have announced the Scottish Government announced in their budget an extension of the rates relief for hospitality and tourism for 3 months. We have budgeted that for a whole year and think that funding should go into a business rates freeze being continued for a full 12 months. And also we've allocated some of that funding, if we were in charge, to investing in education, because a number of young people are struggling with online learning, and the attainment gap is getting greater during these difficult times of COVID-19. But the £1.1 billion, takes it up to now £9.7 billion of additional support just for the pandemic alone from the UK government, and I think that support has been invaluable since the start of the pandemic in March of last year.
Okay, we touched on the border. I mean, just direct question. Do you think it is likely that the border will be closed?
Well, I don't think it should be. I think the two governments can work together to come up with a resolution to the concerns that the Scottish Government have that works with the UK government's quarantine plans. And I just think talk of borders closing is very unhelpful, particularly for many of the businesses and individuals that live on the border, that have to cross the border for work every day, that maybe cross the border to go shopping, that when we start to reopen the economy, it will undoubtedly be crossing the border to use hotels, B&Bs, etc. So any thought right now that the border could close has a knock-on impact in the months ahead. And I was on a call last night where someone was already getting cancellations for months ahead because there was this uncertainty over the border.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real concern for people, obviously, in the hospitality and tourism industry, because even talk of borders being closed, frightens people to death. And in terms of planning their break when eventually they're allowed to, it really isn't very helpful.
And that's, sorry, I was just going to say that's exactly the point that someone raised with me last night. This is not just the immediate problem of, to fit in with quarantine rules. This has a long-term impact. People just think, well, are we welcome in Scotland? Are we going to be turned away if we do book a holiday there in 6 months' time? So they then look to not travel up to Scotland, and that has a huge impact on our industry.
Yeah, completely. With Brigadier David Allfrey asks, with the vaccination programme delivering evidence strong effect, do you have a view on whether there should be some form of vaccination certificate, ideally on phones, he says, that will allow businesses to check that their customers are in date, this particularly for the resumption of events and festivals?
Yeah, so Naheem Zahawi, the vaccines minister, has been updating MPs on this. The government haven't come to a conclusion on this because of some of the difficulties involved in ensuring that the paperwork would work, and it doesn't almost give people too much freedom, because we will still have some restrictions to live with when the vaccines are up to a stage where a large proportion of the population have been covered. But I think, as Dominic Raab said, the Foreign Secretary at the weekend, it's something that's under close consideration. But right now, the priority is just getting as many people protected as possible so we can open up the economy. But it may be something that both governments look at going forward as a way of helping businesses and others to identify those who have received the vaccine and those who are still to receive it.
Thank you. Do you have a sense of the the likely attitude and behaviour of the high street banks in relation to businesses that are struggling particularly. Word has it that they're likely to adopt a rather tougher position than during and after the global financial crisis. Do you think this is likely?
Well, I know John Glenn, who is the Treasury Minister, who has most dealings with a number of the loan schemes and with banks in general, has already been alerted to this issue. He's kind of working with the banks. I think he has twice daily and certainly several times a week calls with the banks about how they will support businesses going forward. And it goes back to the point I was making at the beginning. We can't simply have the support there during the pandemic for that all to be lost as soon as we are out of the health emergency. So there is certainly as much pressure as possible coming from the government for banks to continue to support businesses and work with businesses during the next phase of this pandemic.
Okay, thanks very much, Douglas. Do you think it's likely that any of the various elections and the offing will be delayed due to COVID?
No, I don't. I think if you'd asked me a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I would have said possibly, but it now looks like the elections will go ahead. Obviously in Scotland and Wales, it's to the Parliament. In England, it's for local council elections and police and crime commissioners and mayors in several parts of England. And also, we've got to remember, south of the border, many of these elections have already been delayed for 12 months, and therefore a further delay would, means people haven't had the opportunity to democratically respond to what's been going on. I think we've got to look at how we can have these as safe as possible. So I think postal voting will be a lot higher, and we've got to ensure those who are conducting the polls in polling stations and at the count feel safe. But my guess at the moment would be that the elections will go ahead on the 6th of May.
Thanks. And I think probably a final question from me, Douglas. I'm sure you're aware of the Seat at the Table petition and campaign petitioning for a dedicated Minister of Hospitality. Is this something you support? And is there more that we, the industry, could be doing to lobby government, or that you as leader of the Conservatives in Scotland could be doing on our behalf?
So on the debate itself and the campaign for a seat at the table, I got a lot of businesses in Murray asking me to go along and contribute to that debate. Sadly, I couldn't, because it was one of the last debates to be held in Westminster Hall, which meant you had to be physically present, and I haven't been in Westminster now since early December. So I couldn't actually take part in the debate, but I did watch the proceedings, and I thought the Minister, in response, was saying, he had heard the concerns of the industry. Obviously, it comes under DCMS with Nigel Huddleston as Tourism Minister, so he does have a lot of input both at a department level and then through Oliver Dowden into the Cabinet. But my view is the seat at the table I'd like is businesses to have a seat at the table with the government, and particularly, from my remit here in Scotland, to actually feed into the decisions that are being made. So instead of having a dedicated minister, why don't we have dedicated businesses sat around the table with the government before they take major decisions about the economy, about the response to the pandemic that undoubtedly have a huge impact on businesses, yet businesses have no say in the debate before these crucial decisions are taken, which is why, to go back to my point earlier, I wanted this Coronavirus Business Advisory Council to ensure that seat at the table was filled by business people who are affected by these decisions day in, day out.
Douglas, thank you very much indeed. I guess there's just one final little question. I mean, we've got a lot of fairly influential people on this call this morning. Is there anything that you feel that we in the hospitality and leisure sector could be doing to support the good work that you're doing on our behalf?
Well, I think keep doing what you're doing. I mean, these calls and allowing me to come in, and again, apologies for my technical difficulties, but allowing me to hear directly from you, it means I can then feed back to my colleagues and those of us who are developing our policies in Scotland and at a UK level. I always feed back to the Prime Minister and Secretaries of State about the discussions we've had. I think there has been some outstanding campaigning done by the hospitality and tourism industry, despite everything else you are facing right now. The challenges you are facing just as businesses, while also having to fight for your survival through business support, it has been outstanding. So just continue what you're doing, and rest assured, we have your back. I want to ensure that every single hospitality business can get through this and thrive in the next few years, because we need you, to help our economy get back to pre-pandemic levels, and it will only be by encouraging visitors back to Scotland and giving that, outstanding traditional Scottish welcome that you all provide to local, national and international visitors, that we will get our economy back up and running. So please know that there are those of us at the heart of government who really want you to succeed, and we'll do everything we can to support you.
Douglas, thank you very much indeed. Very helpful and very kind of you to spare the time to join us this morning. And I hope you might be tempted to come back and join us again at some point in the not too distant future, perhaps with a bit of an update from your perspective. But we all wish you well with your endeavours, and anything you can do on behalf of the hospitality and leisure sector would, of course, be hugely appreciated. Don't forget us. Remember, we're here. So thank you again. I'm sorry we didn't meet your son on this particular call. He's obviously been banished to the back bedroom, but we'll hope to see him on another call.
Now, so we're away to make pancakes now, so he's just waiting patiently for that.
Very good. Well, listen, thanks again, Douglas. Very much appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Thanks.
All the very best. Take care. Thanks a lot. So now I'm just about to introduce Ian Millar. But before I do, I would like to just flag a new campaign that is being launched, Save Our Summer. This is being launched by Paul Charles of the PC Agency, as one of our regular contributors, together with a number of leading figures from the travel and hospitality sectors. And it's a campaign which has been established to lobby government really to open up some of the restrictions to enable more movement domestically and indeed internationally. I will circulate some information about the campaign with the normal follow-up email. If people felt willing and able to support the campaign, I know that Paul would be hugely grateful. Right, so without further ado, I would like to now introduce Ian, who's been waiting patiently in the wings. Welcome, Ian. It's very good of you to join us from Lausanne. Just briefly by way of introduction, Ian's been a senior lecturer in information technology at the École Hôtellerie de Lausanne for 20 years. He comes from a hospitality family, so he's a hospitality man through and through, and he spent his entire life in the sector. Originally from the UK, he's lived and worked in the UK, Belgium, Thailand, France, and now Switzerland. He has many honors and many involvements. He is a designated certified hospitality technology professional. He's a student business project coach for the final year bachelor students on top of his teaching. He's also the manager of the Institute of Business Creativity at the École Hôtellerie de Lausanne. Outside of EHL, Ian is the chair of High-Tech European Advisory Council. He's a mentor for the Metro Techstars Accelerator in Berlin, coordinator of the International Hospitality Industry Forum Tech Hub in Berlin. He's a member of the advisory committee of the Global Restaurant Investment Forum, a mentor to 5 hospitality technology startups, and generally he works to enhance technology usage in the hospitality sector. He received the prestigious HFTP Paragon Award for 2020 for lifetime services to hospitality technology and education. So I think it is safe to say that there are a few people around the globe with understanding of technology and its applications within the hospitality sector. So we're very grateful to you, Ian, for sparing your time to join us today. I have given you control so that you can put up your deck of slides, because I know you've got some slides you'd like to share with us. And so if I may, I will hand the baton to you and look forward very much to your insights as to the direction of travel in the technology sector as it impacts on hospitality.
Thank you, Roddy, and thank you in your introduction. Again, the famous words, can you see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. Wonderful then. A quick 20 minutes for a tech update. The 3 areas just for focus is concentrating on guest facing, guest impacting, and a few ideas on back office. So these can be the 3 focal points of the presentation today. that part I put in, but I think Roddy said enough, so enough about me. And really when I was putting this together, the underlying theme we're going through, I don't know about you, I felt a little bit like this for the past year, sort of wandering around, really not knowing what's going on. And I'm sure it's been harder for you guys in industry than myself in education. But also, you know, the whole notion of safety. We've spoken a lot over the last year, you know, about guests and guest safety. We also think our employees' safety as well is coming in, because that's also, you know, an area that is still obviously vastly important. And one area that I'll be touching on towards the end is data. Is really about how we can start and be better with data to improve operations. So that was really just my mindset going through preparing this. Obviously coming from academia and from education, got some numbers and facts, we like that. Interesting one I found on health and safety is now 40% of business travelers is saying that health and safety is the most important factor when booking, compared to 5% pre-COVID. And when it comes to more of our leisure guests, 73% want to avoid crowded destinations. So COVID has obviously given us a very big mind shift in people. Here's just 3 quotes, and I won't read them all out. I'll just let you have a look. But these are from tech people. I think the interesting ones here is, you know, it's COVID has accelerated tech adoption, which in our world is a great thing, but obviously, you know, we'd rather live without the pandemic. Floor Blue in the middle there, he's a CTO of Accor. He said it's really going to be out for them for cost reduction going forward. And the bottom one, Timo, he's the CIO of Millar Hotels. And they're really looking into going to a lot more self-tech for the guests, which I'll be touching on as we go through. This one, and again, I'll let you have a look, you know, the famous ever check-in queues, you know, in our world, and people talk about, you know, AI, machine learning, big data, you know, we still have a lot of operational things that we can be improving. You know, and as I said, you know, COVID has given us an acceleration process on that, which I'll be touching on just in 1 second. And obviously contactless. This has been in our tech world a big thing, and a lot of the people are now saying, you know, that before, when it was a bit of a touchy subject for things like self-check-in, well, now it's actually becoming reality. You know, mobile key was always a contentious point in which I get, you know, there's an investment that comes with it, you know, but now, you know, COVID has accelerated these processes, and really what we're looking for in the tech world is to really have, you know, industry-wide adoption for these solutions, because they do present and give options for the guests when they come to the hotels. So we talk about guest facing now, so that part is really some contextual setting. If you were to ask me now, what could I do as a hotelier, and especially maybe more of an independent hotelier or a small group of tech I could implement now for guests. The one area I'd really concentrate on here is also maybe in the whole digital touchpoint map that we have, is really concentrate more on the sort of stay element as we go through booking as well, but it's really sort of on property stuff. The first thing I would really recommend is digital messaging. This is a quite cheap solution. It allows you to have direct contact with the guest. You know, and as we just discussed beforehand, you know, so with the unknowns we're living in, are you open, are you closed, weddings, no weddings, can I cross the border or not? Well, this allows you to have direct communication with the guests. There's no phone calls, there's no emails, it is literally texting. This in the tech space has really been the area that has really increased the most over the last year. We all do it, we all WhatsApp, we all text. All we're doing now is we're moving into a business context. Great advantage here is, especially if you have multiple properties, you are literally talking about maybe one person controlling all the communication with your guests. You don't necessarily have to have integration, but it just gives that real time on the phone context there. On the bottom right, and Roddy, please feel free to share the slides afterwards, there's a YouTube link to a very interesting presentation on how AI is now coming into hotel phone systems. So that sort of textual element, and machines responding on behalf of the hotels. And if everyone wants to have a look at that, it's a very interesting one. The link is there for you. Another area, you know, this can also link into kiosk check-in, self-check-in, mobile key. You may have seen the announcement by Accor, and they've done Accor Key now. So point being here is the whole check-in, check-out process can and will change, and it's something the guests will be looking for. So, and again, this needs a bit more of a time to adopt, but it's definitely something I would look at and consider. So the old days and where the traditional ways of doing things, I think now COVID has really challenged us on these and is the way to go forward. Another one, which again, I'd imagine quite a few of you adopted QR codes, so quick response codes. And if anyone does know the year and want to put it in the chat, if you get it right, that would be amazing. These have been around for quite a while. To give you a clue, it's actually last century. But QR codes for me is something I would adopt as much as possible. Why? Because they're very, very cheap. They're very easy to implement. And again, it gives control to the guest. One idea and example, I'll take the classic club sandwich. We think before you'd have your paper menu with your club sandwich on, it was a very static process. Club sandwich, please, and that's it. If we now talk about digital, it means imagery, and of course, images sell a lot more. And then, of course, you can do digital upselling. If I chose the club sandwich, you could propose that, do you want that premium beer with a better markup? You can do food and beverage pairing. You can get F&B analysis in real time. So QRs, because it becomes digital, can become very, very interesting going forward. So really recommend keeping with QR codes. One other one, which I think is a must, is casting, what we call Chromecast Mirrorcast. It really depends on how you want to do it. So you sync the guest device with the TV in the room. And it could also be room control. That's a little bit more complex. This is not complex and difficult. And I'm just thinking about those people in the hotels at Heathrow and quarantine, hoping they have this so they can watch their own content on the TV. So this is definitely a great one for the guest room. Because we have, we're probably all of us on at least one of these platforms. Netflix has increased their subscriptions by 5 million due to COVID. So it allows you to stream the content from your own device on the TV. And if anybody is into conspiracy theories, Disney launched one day after we got put into lockdown on the 24th of March. So I think Mickey and Iron Man have got a lot to answer for. But casting definitely, because guests would love it. You could also push the conference rooms. We do start getting business back. The old notion of it's HDMI cable, mini display, VGA, and you have all those connectivity problems. Pretty much all new computers now have casting built in. All the tablets do, all the mobiles do. And it's just a quick and easy thing to do. Coming to guest impacting now. One area I found extremely interesting is location-based POS. So the idea is, and it uses a mix of beacon, QR code, and geofencing. So I don't want to go into my techie world area. For you, what it means is the guest can come into your F&B outlet, and they have an application on their phone, and they self-order. So I'd like a Stella Artois, you pay, that goes into the POS, and then the interesting part here is the system will then tell you where the guest is sat into a range of 0.3 meters. So you literally, whoever's serving the beverage or the food or whatever they're having will know exactly where the guest is in the establishment. And they could be outside on a terrace, around the pool, on a beach, it doesn't matter. So this can be very useful for places where you don't want crowds and you can social distance people, but still provide service to them. And I think we'll see more of this coming out. So the point of sale landscape is definitely altering on this one. Another one is environment monitoring. Seen this coming more and more where you can monitor the environment in the hotel. Example, it could be a guest room. So you can look at air quality. Here's an example dashboard. If the guest is smoking in the room, you can pick this up now. If there was only meant to be one person in the room, it detects CO2 levels for 3 or 4 people. The system will tell you. So it allows you in a way to see what the guest is doing behind the door. It could detect mold in the room. Is there a problem with the air conditioning? So we can have a bit more business intelligence coming in. One, spoken about it, everyone does, please moving to the cloud services. I was even reading an article last night on Hospitality Net by Max, who put it out there saying the exact same thing. Why I think this is interesting for you, before where if you were paying a fixed price, for example, for a PMS, a fixed price per room per month, I'm seeing new models coming out where they're now saying, okay, it's price per usage or maybe price per occupied room. This becomes very interesting, especially financially for you. So definitely more adaptation of cloud services. To quote Fergus Boyd, if you were going to, redo your PMS system, it's like having open heart surgery, hence the picture of the doctor. So I know it's difficult changing out systems, and I'm sorry I had to do this, Peter, because I do actually think Dr. Hancock looks very good on you. So again, it does need a little bit of work going through in a thought process. For that one, if you are making notes, please write this one down, because I think this is probably the biggest game changer I'm speaking about with you this morning, is what we call service bus. So the idea is not to have the PMS as a central system anymore, but you have what's called a data highway, and all the systems sit on the same level. This is massive change. It allows you to change systems in and out a lot easier. So there's no central point anymore. And it's called service bus, some call it middleware. And it's really based around what we call open APIs, so application programming interfaces. It allows you to have multiple systems talking to each other. But as I said, there's no central point. And if you were considering changing your PMS system or moving to the cloud, these are the questions I would have you ask. Are you a cloud business model? Offline mode is still important because the internet is still not 100% that I get. And maybe the two last ones are the important ones. Do you work with open APIs? You're not paying for interfaces. They're already tested with our systems. And do you have what we call in tech a marketplace? These are tried and tested other systems they work with. Crucial question to be asking when you're moving to any system nowadays. Wi-Fi 6 has come out and is coming out now. So this is going to be another one for you. So if you were considering a Wi-Fi upgrade or needed to, the current standard is 802.11ac. I wouldn't upgrade to that at all. I would skip it and go Wi-Fi 6. No, there's no real cost difference at all. But Wi-Fi 6 is the new standard, and it is very, very good. It's working on multiple bands as well and using what's called beamforming. So it'll give you a better Wi-Fi experience, and that is for certain. And the same thing, this is a great presentation I was part of just under an hour by Diego, and I put the link in the bottom there explaining Wi-Fi 6 for hotels and versus 5G versus the current systems. Either yourselves or your IT people haven't watched that. It's a really, really well done video, but definitely Wi-Fi 6 is the new one to move forward. And then the final one in back of house. This is where a little bit less of innovation goes on. I think as an overarching theme, one thing I would start looking to, and I'm actually doing a lot of research on this and putting stuff out there, is IoT. So what we call the Internet of Things. As an example, you could have your fridges and freezers and real-time monitoring about temperature. You come out of temperature range, the system will alert you. You can start having in monitoring your building's environment, predictive maintenance of air conditioning systems, because these little mini devices are literally worth about £2. And they'll be running Linux, and they're just going to sit there and monitor information. So it's really about connecting up a lot more of our physical space and our physical buildings. So this is an overarching theme. It's one for me to really keep an eye out. And then as we move forward, the future outlook, and just want to touch on it today. But it's what we're working on in our area in the tech scene is, okay, data. How can we be better with data in hospitality? Because with all due respect, we haven't been. It's not a criticism at all. It's something we struggle with. But it's go back to what I said before about this open API model that all the systems are adopting nowadays. Data suddenly becomes a reality because we can analyze it and move it around a lot easier, something we haven't been able to do up until now. And again, data gives us insights. We can run our business better. We can make business decisions based upon data. So that's something I know we're working a lot in the tech scene. Just an example of that, I think when it comes to tech, these are probably the best guys. Citizen M, this was their latest internship position for having a data scientist in a hotel company. And Citizen have realized if they have massive amounts of data, and it can be external data, it can be travel data, it can be consumer data or property, you can really adapt and change your business to what's out there. So again, this data mindset coming through. Another one, and that's an area that I'm looking into very much, is what's called RPA. robotic process automation. This is not about robots and about taking people's jobs, and it's actually about machines learn processes. An example could be typical. A night audit might be manually inputting information to an Excel sheet for the GM for somebody in the morning. The software will learn this process and say, hey, you're doing this every night manually, I'll do it for you. So it's actually where machines learn and help people do their job better. So it's not about replacing or getting rid of people. That is a possibility. One hotel company that had 10 people in revenue management, they did put in RPA, they went down to a team of 2 because it removes the data, manual data entry process. This is also something you'll start hearing a lot more because we're now pushing this through in the tech area. And to finish off, and as I promise you, Roddy, I'll do this in time so we don't go over. One last one, and this is not a plug, and I just really think it's useful for you. So these 3 guys on the right, Thibaut, Julien, and Florian, these are actually 3 ex-students of mine based in Berlin, and I've been very supportive of them. They set up a company called Hotel Hero. So hotelhero.tech, with the sole aim was to allow hoteliers to find the right software for their business. Part of their mantra, and it's something I've really instilled in them, is for the hotel industry, this is free. You can go on there, you can go on their website, you can log in, you can create a profile, and you can find software. And they've literally now got hundreds of companies listed, and what works with what works in what geography. So it's really much to allow hoteliers, and they do information sessions, blogs, podcasts. So they're very much supportive of the independent hotelier and small chain in making right technology choices. They've even now just brought out a new contract tool as well. So maybe you've missed that auto renewal date and you're suddenly then locked into a new contract for 3 years. This tool will then actually say, no, you won't, because it will alert you in time. So very much supporting what you guys need in terms of tech and information. There are my references. So if you do want to look, and you said, Roddy, please share with everybody if you're interested to know more. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present to you. As we say, keep calm and carry on. Or as we've been saying, stay positive and test negative. But it's been a pleasure to have this half an hour with you, just sharing what I'm currently seeing in the industry. And I think probably the most famous saying of the year 2020 and probably 2021. So I don't know if we have any questions already coming in. I've been on full screen, so I haven't seen any, and I'm done.
Ian, thank you. I mean, amazing. Thank you so much for covering so much ground in such a short and concise manner, and I think probably giving people an awful lot to think about. And in fact, I've actually written down here, and I think to an extent you've actually answered it with Hotel Hero. But how can if people want further information on any of the technologies you've highlighted, where should they go? I guess the answer is Hotel Hero.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's a starting point. Definitely Hotel Hero. The example I mentioned, guest messaging. And this is my Swiss neutrality part kicking in. And even though, you said I'm originally from the UK, so actually I have my final interview and test on Thursday night to become Swiss. They finally accepted me, so I'm playing the neutral card. So I'm not promoting any one company. That's just wrong. I shouldn't do that. But example, if you think, yes, guest messaging, we've spoken about it in our team, jump on Hotel Hero, guest messaging, there's 10 companies, you can see reviews and who other people are using them. It's a starting point for you. There's also HFTP. We're running, regular sessions like you are on this. If you have questions, send them over to me, LinkedIn, email me, whatever you want. I'll gladly give you some time and help on this. Anything that we can do to help the industry.
That's really kind, Ian. Ian, would you be comfortable with me circulating your email address to people on this call?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Otherwise, we can be a clearinghouse. But if you're happy for us to do that,
that's fine.
That's very kind. There's a question here from Michael Gray, I think, who I think who says, thank you, Ian, for all these insights. How are your students coping in the pandemic? Is their interest in our industry still being sustained?
Yeah, interesting one. It's obviously for our students, we just graduated a batch this week, last week, excuse me. And I've never seen a bigger take up in students going on to do a direct masters, because they're just saying there's nothing out there for us. So, you know, we've been very active in trying to get the hotel companies to engage. I think, unfortunately, we're going to lose a good chunk who may have said, yeah, you know, hospitality is for us, but, you know, with all the problems going through, and it's difficult for them. You know, they had this great vision of, you know, super careers and lives, and then, you know, this has put a real spanner in the works for them. I think both mentally as well. You know, we're doing all digital education. You know, I live 10 minutes away from the school. I've been in for 4 days in 1 year. You know, so, you know, me as well as a teacher, you know, I'm missing my students. You know, being on a Zoom call, okay, it's one thing, but it's tough. If just maybe share one thing, Rod, actually came from a meeting this morning I had with Metro Group. They've actually discovering something interesting that they mentioned this morning is, and this is actually out of France in the restaurant industry. The restaurants in France are getting very worried because with their restaurants being closed, the restaurant workers have suddenly realized that there's a life outside of hospitality. And, you know, doing the hours that we do, you know, and the hard work that is hospitality, they're saying, as wow, you know, I can actually, you know, maybe do something different. And what the restaurateurs are saying is, if we're now going to start reopening, our problem now is getting staff back in because they don't want to come back in. So, you know, I think you know, that's not for me, you know, this out of my competence area, but I think, you know, that's going to be another issue for us, is this whole HR element and keeping people interested in our industry. You know, and I've been saying to our students, you know, keep in hospitality because it is a great industry. There's great people, there's great opportunity. But I think we're going to struggle and lose some, unfortunately.
Well, I guess on that note, Ian, I mean, there are a lot of people on this call who are employers around Europe, not all from the UK by any means. I mean, I guess if any of the people on the call are thinking, for heaven's sakes, you know, we've got these brilliant students coming out of, you know, a top hotel school such as Lausanne. If people have opportunities potentially for your students who are coming out the other end, would it be sensible for them to get in touch with you?
Yes, I mean, we have our own job platform, which is free. You know, if you're looking for anybody, you know, that you can do, you can sign up, jobs.ehl.ch, free. You can post internships, jobs, whatever you like. You know, one thing we are saying to our students, and it's a tough one for us, is hospitality is not looking good at the moment, but go to another industry, learn skills, and then bring them back into hospitality. Is really what we're pushing at the moment to our students. And saying, you know, there's just nothing out there for them. You know, we know we're running the figures right now, and I'll gladly show with you, Roddy, of what percent of our students had a job offer upon graduation. We're normally about 75 to 80%. What I've heard is we're about 20%. So that's 80 who are coming out of a 4-year bachelor degree with no job. And, you know, return on investment. You know, we're not the most expensive hotel school, but we're not cheap either. You know, I get it. You know, parents and students want return on investments. So yeah, so we're obviously being supportive as much as possible, but it's tough, and I don't need to tell you guys because you're living it every day. So
well, if anybody on the call has any thoughts about how they might be able to support any of the students, I'm sure Ian would be absolutely delighted to hear from you. Ian, a final question from me. I mean, there have been various or numerous comments in the chat box of people saying how much they've enjoyed your presentation, but just a sort of very practical final question from me. There are lots of independent hotel owners and operators and indeed representatives of larger companies, but particularly for the independents, what 2 or 3 areas would you suggest that people can look at where they can get, you know, perhaps biggest bang for their buck, which are technologies that are likely to have greatest impact?
I think that the first one I mentioned, the guest messaging, I think that one is massive because it allows you to upsell, it allows you to communicate, it allows you to promote. You know, so that is literally texting your guest and your guest texting you. The majority now have real-time translation. You know, so you can text the guest in English and they might be German, they get it in German, they reply to you in German, it comes back to you in English. And they're very accurate now because they're running on Google Translate. So I think it is an engagement one that would, if you ask me if I had £5,000 to put on something, I would go with that, because I think that's the biggest impact, and especially for you as an independent, and especially if you have 2 or 3 properties, there you can have one person doing that, representing all 3 properties. You don't need 3 people, and it's not email, it's not phone calls. I think that's where the biggest one is, because it's also communication. It can lead to better trust with the guest. Here's our latest update on our opening conditions, or how breakfast will be. So I think that's where I would, if you ask me, that's where I'd put my money.
Thank you, Ian. Ian, that's been fascinating and I'm sure incredibly helpful for a lot of people on the call. So thank you very, very much indeed. I hope you'll continue to perhaps beam into our sessions from time to time. And if you feel there's something you would like to update us on at any point, we would absolutely love to hear from you. So thank you for your time. I know how much work and preparation goes into putting together that kind of presentation. So it is hugely appreciated by us all. So thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely.
So I think that's about it for this week, folks. Just to say that next week, I very much look forward to welcoming Peter Hancock. Peter is actually with us today, just I think checking out what we all get up to. So Peter, we very much look forward to welcoming you next week. Peter's the Chief Executive of Pride of Britain Hotels, as I'm sure everybody is aware. Peter's never short of a thing or two to say, so I'm sure he'll have some interesting and amusing thoughts and observations to share with us. And then I'm delighted to be welcoming Claire Mullen as well. Claire is the Director of Marketing for Visit Britain. Claire's going to be joining us to give us a quick update on what Visit Britain are up to, but she's also involved in undertaking some fairly in-depth research at the moment, and she's going to return in another 4 or 5 weeks as well to give us the results of that research on both consumer attitudes, consumer behaviour, and likely behaviour in the sort of post-pandemic period. So 2 very interesting speakers next week. I hope we can welcome back as many of you as can make it, and of course the call is recorded anyway for those of you that can't. So without further ado, thank you very much once again, Ian. Thank you to Douglas Ross in absentia for his contribution. Thank you to all of you for sparing the time to join us. Have a great week. The sun is shining, the snow has melted, and we're looking forward to a better week. So stay safe, and hope to see as many of you as possible at 10 o'clock next Tuesday. All the very best. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roddy.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roddy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Not at all.
Thanks, Roddy. Great stuff.
Thank you, Michael,
For a great call.
for the introduction to it.
Thanks, Roddy.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Nick,
Bye-bye,
Patty,
everybody.
if you can
Thanks.
hear me, could you wait on the call for a second?
Yep, will do.
Yeah, it's just one thing I wanted to ask you, if you've got just 2 minutes.
For sure.
I'll just wait for others to exit. And actually, I'll turn off the recording as well. How do we do that? Stop recording. There we go.